Okay, I share looping.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, Pak Johan, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. Greetings from me from Indonesia. I hope all of us are in a good health and in a happy mood to listening to our current webinar regarding the digital wealth management. This webinar is a collaboration between CFA Society Indonesia and Additiv, the leading Swiss wealth tech provider. I'm so excited today, ladies and gentlemen, and I have been trusted by CFA Society Indonesia to moderate this distinguished session. So before we start, I would like to introduce myself. As you see in the flyer, my name is Johan Chandra, In short, I am the founder and CEO of PT Starvin Nawasena Indonesia, a boutique management advisory, business coaching, and corporate training house in five core competencies in strategy, risk management, finance, investment, and business incubation. In this webinar, we only have around 1 hour in total, yeah, so short, yeah, actually, to convey the information regarding the digital wealth management trend, including the Q&A session. So please write your question in the chat box, ladies and gentlemen, or if you want to raise the question directly to the speakers, please raise your digital hand to be unmuted later on. Yeah, so for your information, we will only have 2 speakers instead of 3. Yeah, before I believe that you have received the flyer with the 3 speakers, since Kevin cannot make it due to one and other urgent matters. Yeah, both speakers from Additiv will update us about what is happening in the wealth management industry. So let me introduce to our speakers. Yeah. The first speaker is Peter Gistra. He is a head of strategy sales of Additiv. He is a decent professional with more than 20 years in tech industry. He is responsible for sales in Asia Pacific. Yeah. Prior to Additiv, he has been working for Capgemini in Europe and Orange in Asia, Middle East, and Africa, having worked on digital transformation projects in numerous countries. And his home has been on the Indonesian island of Bali. Yeah, so Peter can speak Indonesia very well. Welcome, Peter.
Makasih,
and the second one is Victor Wongso Negoro. He is a senior sales manager with Additiv, a leading provider of digital wealth management solution. Yeah, in his role, he is responsible for executing the sales and marketing strategy in Southeast Asia and continuing the firm's growth drive in the region. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's go directly to the content of our webinar and enjoy the session. For Peter and Victor, the screen and control are yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Pa Johan, for your kind words. We've agreed we would do the presentation in English, tapi kalau nanti ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia, jangan ragu-ragu, kita berusaha untuk menjawab sebaik mungkin. So, thank you also, Pa Rahmat and Ibu Dewi, for hosting us tonight with the Friends of CFA Society Indonesia. Tonight, we want to share a little bit the future of digital wealth management. And of course, digital wealth management is a little bit part of the overall digital banking. So I will also share a little bit about what is happening in digital banking. In the first part, I will share with you a little bit on the new use cases that we see happening around us, the competition in the market. Then Victor will zoom in a little bit on what we see happening also in the Indonesian market, and we share a little bit more about the Additiv, what is the solution, how several customers have used it, and then if time permits, we can do both the Q&A, because as mentioned by Johan, the time is a little bit limited, but if we still have a little bit extra time, Victor can also do a little demonstration if that would be requested. So let me start then with a little bit talking about the new use cases that we see happening within the financial industry. Because one of the words that, and we're all professionals in the industry, that summarizes what is happening today, I think, is the word disruption. We see an enormous push of technology. We see new players emerging. We see that user behavior from the younger generation is changing. It's changing our perception on how banking should be, and it's changing our perception how wealth should be. The title of this slide, maybe some of you will recognize. It was 25, 30 years ago that Bill Gates mentioned the famous sentence, "We need banking, but we don't need banks." So what he actually meant there is that the technology can support a lot of the banking functions, and it not necessarily needs to be the banking. Now, 25 years later, we see that there's a little bit of truth in that vision, because we see actually that there are several new players coming up in the market that are offering banking functionality, who not necessarily we would classify as the traditional bank, the traditional branch bank. We look at e-commerce platforms. In Asia, we look at super apps. In Europe, we see e-commerce brokers. We see new dedicated mobile finance portals. There's a lot happening in the market. And I want to share with you how we can understand this by using an example from a book that is called Bye Bye Banks. It's a little bit provocative, but actually what it says, the 3 steps that it envisioned, how the banking industry, how the digital banking industry, how the digital wealth is changing, are quite relevant if we look at it from our own example. So the first step that is mentioned in the book is that the traditional bank is becoming displaced. What does it mean? Look at, each one of you, look at your mobile phone. How many apps do you have already that deal with finances? Is it just your mobile banking app, or are there other different apps already that you use? Because for some of us, if I have to transfer money to my family back in Holland, or if to my son who's studying there, I not go to a bank. I don't use the banking app. I use Wise, TransferWise, for example. And if we want to do investment, as we will see later in Singapore, you can use, let's say, your mobile app that you have from Grab Invest. So what we see happening is that the interfaces become critical. The mobile applications are actually becoming critical, and banks no longer have an exclusivity on that mobile interface. That is going to become a lot more challenging for banks, because what we will see is in the future, you buy a ticket from Garuda on your mobile phone, you will get an offer for a short-term loan. You don't need to check with the bank. It is Garuda who will offer you that loan, or Tokopedia who will offer you a short pay now, buy later functionality. This is what we call embedded finance. And this embedded finance is happening around us. It obviously, from a technology point of view, it requires interfaces, it requires APIs, a lot of modern cloud-based technologies, but we see it already happening. And that first step, I should say, that was mentioned, that the traditional banks have to compete with new players in the market, sometimes finance players, but also different players like big brands who want to offer finance functions, is already happening. Now, interesting enough, last week a report was published that you see on the graph on the right side, how this will impact the valuation of the financial service firms. And as you can see, from an investment point of view, from a valuation point of view, there is already significant changes in the valuation of the banks 3 years ago compared to today, the traditional banks. And one of the reasons is probably that statement that I started with from Mr. Bill Gates, that customers are looking for banking. They're looking for a possibility, an opportunity, a solution that can help them to address a financial need, a financial question, and there will be multiple players in that market. And as you can see, it does have an impact for the future of the banks. So banks really need to step up in order to provide better digital banking services. The second phase, which is happening, and this is what is called diminished. The minute we have these different mobile apps on our phone, the minute we don't only have the banking apps, but other apps, we will use them for more and more financial services. Because imagine if I would use that example earlier, if I would go to the Garuda website and I want to book a ticket for my wife and kids to the Belanda, where I'm originally from, okay, 40 million. If I can get a loan from Garuda, maybe a 2-3 months loan at attractive interest rate, maybe I will choose that. But then, in fact, what Garuda can do, they can source that loan from multiple financial providers. So what we will see is that first step that we mentioned, when the bank is losing the contact, the direct contact with the end consumer, suddenly it opens the door for competition to offer multiple financial services. And we see this especially in Southeast Asia, especially with likes of Gojek merging with Tokopedia, and also with Grab. Both, as we are aware, are now claiming or searching digital banking licenses. We have Bank Jago in Indonesia. We have the new digital banking license that was awarded last year between Grab and Singtel. So these super apps, they are actually becoming your interface for much more financial services than we currently can imagine. And again, this is embedded wealth and this is embedded finance. In the example I mentioned, in Singapore now, you take a ride with the taxi, you automatically invest in a mutual fund offered to you by Grab. 3-4 years ago, we could not imagine this, but with these latest technologies that I mentioned, these new players are changing the ecosystem, and they are growing very fast in some cases. So from the younger generation, the digital generation, they want to have this functionality, this capability. The example I gave already is that there is obviously a lot of, from a digital wealth point of view, a lot of interest both in these new strong brands. We talk about the Bukalapaks, we talk about Tokopedias, we talk about the Grabs, the Gojek, you name them. They all have multi-million users, and those distribution channels, those digital distribution channels, can be now used by traditional banks, banking as a service. They can be used by new fund houses in order to expand their distribution reach. So we can see a lot of changes in the market happening in Southeast Asia over the coming years, partly because they have been awarded digital banking licenses, partly they have purchased banks and applying with OJK for digital banking licenses. And as you can see in that little graph I put there on the right, there is a significant increase of investment overall that we see happening in the market. That is partly because these new players are coming up with very easy 2-3 clicks and I can make an investment, another 2-3 clicks and I can auto rebalance my portfolio automatically. But of course also because people want to get a higher yield on their savings account. And these solutions make it very easy to invest money from your mobile phone wherever you are, with what we call this instant gratification. A couple of clicks and you can buy a mutual fund. That is already happening across us in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. So the impact from the banks is obviously that first picture I showed you. The valuation is going down because they now have to compete. Although there are new services being launched, there is a challenge. I think we all are aware of that the banks need to upgrade their IT systems, and upgrading those IT systems is sometimes not always easy. It will at least take time, but then the banks will be able to fully compete again. The last step is also a very interesting one in the book. It actually questions the foundation of what we call the financial system. Because what we see is that by new technologies, and we think of blockchain technologies, actually we get away from the idea of centralized databases where everything is controlled and everything is managed. You will see and read a lot in the future about new blockchain technologies and new use cases. And I'm not so much interested in the Bitcoin, because that is, some of us are very cautious about them. Some of them are very enthusiastic about them. But what you see happening is that all the central banks are offering digital currencies, digital banking currencies, digital currencies. This is happening in China. This is happening in Europe. There's a lot of attention. And it will also come in Indonesia. The benefit, obviously, is that with the e-currencies, with the underlying blockchain technologies, it can make the financial system much more transparent. It can also make the financial system much more economic, much more cheaper, because a lot of the friction, all these different parties that are in between, will actually be reduced. Interesting enough, we see already in Hong Kong and in Singapore now some of the new companies that are using these blockchain technologies and allow you to start investing in decentralized finance, what we call decentralized finance. So this technology allows us to invest, for example, in a percentage of a condominium. So maybe I would like to invest in a nice, let me give an example, a nice villa in Bali or a nice apartment in Menteng, but it's quite pricey. With these new technologies, we can allow these investments to be run on a blockchain technology, and we can purchase certain percentages, a certain part using those technologies. So there's a lot of new investment use cases, a lot of new banking use cases, partly driven by the banks themselves and partly driven by new players in the market that will expand what we call wealth as a service or embedded wealth. So these are just a little bit high level, perhaps, but some of the examples I mentioned, we have already seen around us. For those in Indonesia, we've seen how the Gojeks have increased rapidly, the Bukalapaks, and how they're now offering financial services. And I'm sure that in a couple of years, we can also see much more usage of these new blockchain technologies in the market. So that's a little bit from the high level perspective. Victor, maybe you can share a little bit. We zoom in on digital wealth management.
Sure, Peter, thanks a lot. All right. So on the digital wealth management, as we can see this year, COVID-19 has created a significant challenge for financial institutions worldwide, and it highlighted the need for digital transformation. Why? As you can see, because client expectations have changed. So with social distancing and people not allowed to visit their banks and any physical location to seek advice, people or the public now require a real-time, seamless, omni-channel digital tools or application in their hands, right, for their day-to-day needs. I mean, it is especially true in Indonesia, where most of the population is digitally savvy and young. And the pandemic has also given a first-hand experience on the importance of savings and emergency funds to tide through tough times. Thus, we are also noticing a greater awareness for savings and investment. Secondly, for the wealth manager or basically the workforce, remote work will be the standard. Thus, you need relevant digital tools to remain competitive. And we believe moving forward, partial remote work will be the new norm. Another new norm will be the new hybrid wealth management practices, where seamless interactions and advisories can be achieved between clients and the advisors. And more importantly, is to lower the cost of operations, especially during a trying time. And all these can be achieved by embracing a digital change. On the third point, as we can see that the pandemic has accelerated the urgency to launch new business models. At the forefront is the fintech and the technology-focused companies, where they are able to go to market quickly with new offerings to target the various segments, and also to seize the market share from the incumbents. I mean, we have seen various launches during the pandemic in Indonesia, such as new digital banks, super apps from banks, which has gained traction very quickly, and it is very well embraced by the population. More and more clients are also investing through a robo-advisory, which is fully automated investment services, as it is much simpler and more user-friendly. We also see this trend is especially prevalent in the Southeast Asia region or emerging markets, where there's a lot of new wealth being created. Next page, please, Peter. And the question is, why Indonesia? Right? Basically, Indonesia presents a huge opportunity in the market, especially in the mass affluent segment or the higher end of mass segment. So how do you define this? It's basically the segment or the public that has at least $50,000 in liquid asset, right? So the mass affluent segment is made of relatively young professionals who are digital natives. So basically they grew up with smartphone and exposed to all things digital. Thus, they will expect the same thing from the financial services as well. They are also more conscious of money. They save more, they spend less, and thus it gives rise to the mass affluent segment. Okay. From a recent BCG report, the mass affluent in Indonesia is expected to increase from 9% to 21% of the population by 2030. right? And this 21% will hold about almost half of the total wealth of the population. So you can see why this segment is extremely lucrative and is actively being targeted by the financial institution and the wealth manager. The data from global data on the bottom right as well, it further support the rise of the mass affluent and high net worth individual in Indonesia. You can see the number has been growing year on year since 2014 and all the way to 2022 and after. As well, if you deep dive further into the interesting facts on the BCG reports on the bottom left, you can see that 90% of the mass affluent in Southeast Asia, basically they earn their money from as a salaried professional or operating businesses. And more interestingly is that 64% are under the age of 40. So it's a relatively young cohort, right? And 56% rose up from the middle class within the past 5 years. Right? On this page, it shows the active user growth and engagement of financial and mobile banking apps. We can see that Vietnam is still #1, but Indonesia number is relatively high for year-to-date monthly active user growth. It means that the population in Indonesia are digitally savvy, although you can also infer that a large part of the population is still well underbanked or have limited access to certain banking services. Thus, once the apps were enhanced with new features or functionalities, the uptick in engagement increases tremendously, and it means huge opportunities for digital disruptor. Next picture. Right. And in financial services distribution, we see super apps, fintech, e-commerce apps have been launching new investment services. Example, Grab or Living by Mandiri, and some other examples on screen as well. Yes, these apps leverage on the huge existing user base to offer new services, gain more market share, and to keep users in the ecosystem as much as possible. It is only natural that the existing user will invest through the apps that they currently have, as it's much simpler and it's embedded without having to re-sign up or switch to another provider. Some of these apps even offer the ability to book for courier or book for tele-doctor directly from the app, and it has become a necessity for most people in Indonesia. We also see an uptick in digital banks in Indonesia. Some examples are like Genius, Jago, Line Bank, and so on. Even incumbents such as BCA, the DBS, UOB have launched their own fully digital bank. All these fully digital banks offer customers with usually much faster account opening. You can open account through the app as fast as 5 minutes. They also offer higher interest rate. I mean, the reason they're able to do so because, I mean, they're fully digital, so they have lower capex and opex. All these services are driving up the financial inclusion, where most traditional banks are still playing catch up. Next. Okay. So before we have seen all the digital disruptions, now we can touch on the true dilemma for the financial institution. As you can see from the chart, despite growing AUM, more people are getting wealthier and looking to invest. We see a fall on the ROA, or return on asset, probably due to lower interest rate or other factors. Thus, the cost-income ratio will naturally increase, which reduces the cost efficiency due to increasing competition, the lack of low-cost investment, or distribution channels. And the bottom line, it means lower profit, right? And one way to increase AUM while lowering the marginal cost is basically for incumbents to partner with digital platforms. It can be for distribution, it can be for new services, and to provide high-yield services to the market. This will enable the financial institution to remain profitable and stay competitive amongst the new digital disruptors in the market. Okay. So in the next section, I think Peter will show how some of these incumbents have addressed these dilemmas and also the lesson learned.
Thank you, Victor. Victor mentioned a very important word, digital platforms. Obviously, when we spoke earlier about the new players in the market, the super apps, the e-commerce platforms, the online brokers, the financial service apps, one of the things they all have in common is that they are native by design. And that means that they're able to scale much quicker. They're able to use multiple distribution channels, the ones they control themselves, or through partnerships, in order to generate what we call decreasing marginal costs. And since this is a presentation for the C of A Society, I think everyone here knows immediately what I mean with decreasing marginal cost, right? Because that is fundamental to the business case of digital wealth and digital finance. And what banks are looking for, and equally what fintech are looking for, is actually being able to have these digital platforms. Additiv is a company that is exactly operating in that space. What we have done, it's Swiss, as you know, it's a little bit the capital of wealth. We're Swiss headquartered. We operate in multiple parts of the world. We always call ourselves a startup with 25 years of experience, because we have, if you can see at the customer lists, we've been in business for the last 25 years, and we focus on helping financial institutions building these digital platforms, supporting with digital platforms in order to launch these new services that we mentioned. And the way we do that is using very modern technology infrastructure. So we have cloud-based capabilities. We also can do on-prem, but we have cloud-based capabilities. We have API libraries for digital users, and we have that digital platform that I mentioned. Now, it's one thing to be proud of your own company, but it's always nice if someone else also shares that same feeling. And interesting for us, there was a large report done, a market analysis was done in February this year by a company called Aperture, and they looked at 20 different wealth tech vendors. And Additiv came out leading. And one of the reasons why Additiv came out leading in this report is that tech stack that I just mentioned, a modern digital orchestration platform, an API library for digital wealth management, cloud-based capabilities, actually it allows banks, insurance companies, fund houses, asset managers, even the fintechs, it allows them to offer new digital wealth services with these decreasing marginal costs. So that what is called technology enablement obviously allows business model enablement, because now with these new platforms like the one that Additiv offers, companies can actually offer banking as a service. They can offer their infrastructure to these to these fintech companies, but also it offers services for distribution of these digital wealth solutions that Victor highlighted. So that was for us obviously a very good feedback that we got from market research. It was also featured in Forbes magazine, and even up till a couple of months ago, we also were awarded the FinTech Innovator in Asia Pac Award. So that was also confirmation from the market that the investments we're making in our orchestration platform are well spent. So this is a little bit what you need. If you look at it from a logical architecture point of view, any bank, any fintech, whether it's a Grab or a Gojek, or whether it's BCA or BRI, they will need an orchestration platform above the standard architectures that they already have in place, above their core banking system they have already in place. And the reason for that is, as we mentioned, the mass market has fundamentally different requirements from an IT point of view than when you deal with, let's say, 30 or 40,000 wealth customers. We are suddenly talking about the potential for Indonesia to have tens, if not more millions of new wealth customers. And of course, that requires a very modern technological architecture, a very modern IT architecture, which we call a system of intelligence, which grabs all the data from the financial sources, from from the various backend systems that the companies have, and it allows the configuration of these new user journeys that we've highlighted briefly. When you book a ticket at Garuda, you will need to have an interface, an API. When you order a taxi and you want to invest a certain amount of money, or when you book a mutual fund through, let's say, a Bukalapak website, all these new user journeys will require some sort of a system of intelligence that that the banks can use. So we just wanted to share, in the interest of time, 2 or 3 references that we see how customers have actually used the Additiv system and how it helps them to expand the business, in this case of a bank, of Commonwealth Bank, how they were able to expand the business. Now, this is an interesting example for 2 reasons. One, it's in Indonesia. So this is a very strong reference we have with the Commonwealth Bank in Indonesia, who were 3-4 years ago were looking at exactly a digital wealth platform. So very visionary leadership already 4 years ago, realizing the market is changing, realizing they need to have more digital platforms to offer quicker services, cheaper services, better services, and increase obviously the business. Additiv was selected 4 years ago, and the figures I have in this presentation I received from the bank a while ago, and you can see that it was 25 year-on-year increase of new customers who actually like the idea of having a mobile interface 24/7. They can use to run their investment journeys. No need for to go to a branch, no need to go to a relationship manager, but being able to do your trades with the comfort of a mobile app. The numbers are increasing. I think they're growing now by thousands. The latest numbers I received, thousands, multiple thousands customers per month are signing up. So that is a good success for our friends in Commonwealth Bank. I had the pleasure to meet Pak Ivan Kusuma a while ago, and in the presentation that you will all have access to, there's a link for the full video, and he talks about financial inclusion as the future for Indonesia. He talks about artificial intelligence, and he talks about a lot of how they use the platform to get new user journeys and the ambitions that they're having. So I would, for those interested, you can get the link and the video, and it's a very strong vision of a leadership in digital wealth in Indonesia. Another customer that we have about 20-30 customers, I just picked 2 and 3, is a very strong England customer, UK-based customer. They wanted to bundle wealth with investment journeys and with insurance and with pension journeys. So very complicated, complicated because the regulator is obviously very much involved from a banking point of view, and also complicated because they had, I think, 28 different backend systems that all needed to provide different data, which from an IT point of view is obviously a little bit of a challenge. But what they have done is for all their different brands, because it's a large banking group, they've decided to use the Additiv platform, the DFS, as we call it, the Digital Financial Suite, because it allows them to offer different type of service, different type of banking service, different type of wealth services through the various channels that they have. And as you can see on the slide, each of these digital front ends looks totally different, has a different customer base. NatWest is a retail bank, Royal Bank of Scotland is obviously a Main Street bank, Coates is a high-end wealth manager, but these banks have one orchestration layer, one Additiv platform that will help them to manage their complete wealth management business. This is an interesting example, and I like this example because when you go to Europe, you see all these post offices, and the post offices are, in all fairness, they're not the latest when it comes to innovation. They've been around for hundreds of years, 100 years, more than 100 years. This is the Swiss Post Finance, and they decided, they came to us and said, listen, why can we not offer wealth investment products, but wealth investment products for the middle class, not the high end, because Switzerland is full of wealth managers, but as low as 5,000 Swiss francs, which is about 5,000 US. So they came to us, and in 6-7 months we managed to launch the solution with them, thanks to the benefit of the cloud. Of course, the cloud is helping a lot of the financial service industry to grow much more rapidly than in the past, and they now have almost 1 million of post-finance clients who have access to the tool, and they increase year on year. I think this figure is outdated. They now have about 500 million of capital that they have under assets of management through these new solutions. So that is 3 examples when we talk about the traditional, I would say the traditional banks moving to digital transformation, adopting these platforms. What is going to be much more important over the coming years is when we talk about wealth as a service, wealth management as a service. And this is an example from Sweden, which was launched last month by Additiv. This is a situation where in the northern European countries, in Sweden, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, we call it Scandinavia, that part of Europe, there are a lot of independent financial advisors. And of course, these independent financial advisors, due to COVID, they can't meet their customers face to face. Sometimes there are restrictions. So they were looking at a platform, wealth service as a platform that can help them to run their business, even in COVID times, at lower costs. So we partnered with a company called Evida. Evida has the wealth management services, and we offer that now in the Scandinavian countries to a lot of independent financial advisors who are using the platform to be able to support their customers for wealth services. Now, one of the things, if you talk about fintech, is that it's an ecosystem of partnerships. Additiv is also, so in this case, we partnered with Kidbrook, which is a financial planning tool, because people want to understand how is my retirement situation, how is my future wealth situation. So you need a financial planner tool. It talks about obviously the investment products, bonds, securities, mutual funds, you name it. People want to have multiple options to invest, and it has to be all digital. So digital onboarding with all the required eKYC and eAML and the electric signatures, where we partnered with a company like Signicat. And these examples, these type of services, I'm confident we will see them in the future in Indonesia as well, where there will be much more platforms supporting these user journeys, these digital wealth user journeys. For those who are interested in a little bit more information, Additiv has written over the last 2-3 months a number of white papers. You're very welcome to go to the website Embedded Wealth, additiv.com Embedded Wealth, and you can download the white papers. It is a white paper on global embedded wealth with examples and best practices around the world of deployments that Additiv has done. It is also a dedicated white paper for Southeast Asia, wealth management in Asia, and Indonesia is also featuring in that white paper. So for those who want to understand a little bit more after this presentation from CFA Indonesia, feel free to get in touch with us or go to the website if you have a little bit more information. That was a little bit the story we wanted to share with the friends of CFA Indonesia. So we started with a little bit high level on what changes do we see happening in the financial services industry, where we talk not so much anymore on banks only, but also on banking. And banking can be done by super apps. Banking can be done by strong brands, by e-commerce platforms. And the only reason why these different distribution channels can exist and will expand in the future is because of these digital platforms that allow for decreasing marginal costs. I've spoken a lot. Mudah-mudahan teman-teman dari CFA Society lagi ada beberapa pertanyaan, atau Pak Johan, mungkin kita kembalikan ke Pak Johan.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for all the speakers. Please give a big digital applause to all our speakers today. And I hope you enjoy and get updated with the informations. Now we will enter to the Q&A session within a very limited time, or maybe 20 minutes ahead. I have one question from the chat box, and while waiting for the others to write down your questions, and maybe you want to raise hand, so you want to talk directly to the speakers. So we will start for the Q&A. The first question from Andramika. Andramika, yeah. Within wealth management, which subsector seems to have the lowest barrier to entry for the new fintech player to disrupt the market? Yeah, please, Peter or Victor can answer this.
Let me make sure I understand it, because it seems like a very strategic question. So I want to make sure I understand it. Which of the digital wealth management has the lowest barrier of entry?
Yeah, maybe Andramika, can you speak? Unmute your mic, so you can explain it directly. What is your questions? Please, Andramika. Hello, Andramika. Are you there? I'm afraid he or she not there. Peter.
No problem. No problem.
Yes,
I can try
yeah.
to answer it. It's a very
Yes,
strategic question. It's a very good question as well, by Johan. The lowest barrier of entry. So I think the three letters that we need to mention in Indonesia are OJK, right? Because when we talk about digital wealth, when we talk about wealth management, we talk about regulated financial institutions. So the lowest barrier of entry would, in my opinion, be the ones that have an existing customer base that allow for digital distribution of wealth products. And ideally, a customer base that is on the higher end of the pyramid, because if you have a customer base of, let's say, tens of millions of existing customers who order digital goods with you, digital services, then you can monetize that customer base and talk to some of the new banking players who offer bank as a service. Now, let me share an example of what is happening. For example, Bukalapak signed a partnership with Standard Chartered Bank Indonesia. Again, a very visionary partnership, in my opinion, using the Nexus platform that Standard Chartered Bank has built. So what does it mean? It means that these digital distribution players, they can now offer digital wealth solutions without investing in the CapEx and OpEx of a large IT system, without going to the OJK regulator to become a regulated wealth entity, because they're distributing products on behalf of someone else. So my answer to this question would be, and I think this is something that we're already seeing happening around us in Southeast Asia. There are large e-commerce platforms who have hundreds and super apps who have hundreds of millions of annual users, who have like tens of millions of unique users. They can be an excellent distribution channel to reach people that the younger generation, as Victor mentioned, that might not want to go to a traditional wealth manager because they want to invest maybe 1 juta daripada 100 juta.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you for your answer, Peter. We are waiting for the other question. While we are waiting, I would like to have a question to you. Yeah, in this borderless era, everybody can transact anywhere and anytime. And most of the time, we use our handphone to buy almost everything. Yeah, almost everything right now. Regarding the digital risk, yeah, the digital risk, how do you see this kind of risk will emerge significantly in the digital of wealth management?
That is an important question, but there's a lot of theory in digital financial services about identity management, because one of the things that you want to ensure on the customer side is that your transactions are protected, but also on the supplier side, you know, that your brand will not be tarnished, or that your license will be revoked, etc. So the key, I think the key challenge is partly your IT infrastructure. A lot of the banks, traditional banks, they have grown over the years. Sometimes they have merger and acquisitions. They are using what we call a legacy environment that sometimes consists of different generations of IT systems, different generations of application layers, and that needs to be upgraded. Obviously, that's a massive operation, right? So banks are rightly taking small steps to avoid that these risks will happen. For me, I think the interesting part is on these digital identities part, because that is a new area where we will in the future have a lot more to do with. Nowadays, we still have our passport or KTP, and that is being used as our digital identity. But there will be in Africa. I used to work in Africa. There is a lot of people who do not have these type of identification papers, and there's an enormous amount of bad debts that banks are facing because they don't have these KYC, know your customer systems, in place. So you have digital identity providers, and it's interesting that you have some fintechs in Africa who use data from, for example, your Facebook feed to give you points on your digital identity, because the assumption is that people who are using Facebook, most likely they will do it under their own name, and they have obviously direct contacts with their families and friends, and that gives a lot more data points for these digital identity providers. So that's an interesting area, because I think in Indonesia we obviously also have people who don't have access to the traditional financial systems, who might not be able to open a bank account for multiple reasons, but they will in the future use these mobile apps to transact financial businesses. So yeah, a digital identity provider, I think, is the solution there.
Thank you, Peter. Any additional maybe from Victor regarding about the digital risk in wealth management? How you Additiv, especially to resolve this kind of issue?
Digital risk. I think digital risk, I mean, when digital wealth management, I mean, yes, become like it's here to stay. I mean, it's a new phenomenon, but it's here to stay. So I think everyone just need to be more aware of what they're assessing. Basically, just to be aware of the risk.
But I think also from a technology point of view, Pat, let's not forget it. We're talking about data packets. We're talking about data moving from a smartphone through a mobile network, or through an internet network into a server in a cloud environment or on premise. So the IT aspect still remains very, very important, to have encryption on the data, to have all the security, because as we see around us, the more people use their mobile phones for financial transaction, of course, it will invite a certain type of interest from criminals.
Thank you, Peter and Victor. I'm still waiting, ladies and gentlemen, for the questions. I don't see any question on the chat box, or maybe one of you or two, maybe of you would like to ask directly to the Peter or Victor directly. Please, we still have around 5 minutes before I close the webinar. Okay, while waiting, I'm still have a question, Peter, to you. May I?
Yes, of course, Pat.
Yeah.
I hope I have the answer.
Yeah, it's easy for you, I think. You know, in BCA right now, for the last 2 months, the CEO himself stated that BCA already apply the digital banking. Yeah, as well as we know, if we can see the journey of the transaction banking application, starting from SMS banking, mobile banking, and digital banking. However, there are one interesting statement from the CEO himself. He stated that the most of the BCA customer are already convenient with the SMS banking. Yeah, since they are coming from the older generation. How do you see this kind of phenomena? Yeah, since our people maybe not there yet, maybe they are not ready yet for this kind of technology. And how do you think to penetrate this kind of digital technology faster to Indonesian people from the Additiv point of view? Yes, please, Peter or Victor.
I will share with you a nice anecdote, Pa. When I started my first job in Indonesia, it was in 1995. 1994, and I was working for a company called Satelindo. Some of you might have heard of it. It doesn't exist anymore. And
Okay.
we were making projections for. I was doing strategy for mobile phones, in Indonesia, and we were doing a forecast for how many customers we would have with the mobile phone for the next year. We had lots of meetings in Satelindo in 1995 talking how many future customers will we have with this mobile phone, right? And we came up with maybe 100,000. We're not talking 5G or 4G or 3G or 2G, we're talking 1G, right? This was just something new. We thought maybe the super elite will have a mobile phone and they're willing to pay for it. 100,000 customers was our prediction. Look how wrong were we? How totally wrong were we? What do we see now in Indonesia? I think about 280 million people, and I think we have about 280 million mobile phones, and they have more computer capacity than we could ever imagine, right? So I think that even the older generation, the minute BCA would offer some partnership with WhatsApp, for example, on being able to do transactions over WhatsApp, if the OJK would allow it, I think people will use it, no matter if they're 20 or if they're 70 years old. The convenience factor is there. So we do have a lot of discussion with banks, and they say, listen, we have, especially in wealth management, we have older customers. They like the personal approach, and we say keep that personal approach, but give your team, give them the right digital tools as well, because COVID has learned that without digital tools, suddenly it's much more difficult to do your business, right? So I don't think the older generation is against technology.
Yes, of course. Maybe they are not yet ready. Okay, any additional comment from Victor?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. There are one questions from Pak Sulat Sri Hardanto, Peter and Victor. Are the independent wealth managers can use your apps or website to serve their clients in investment area or insurance, for example? Please, Peter and Victor.
Victor, you want to answer or?
Yes, can. Yeah, so basically, I think we have the tools or the tool or the solution to serve the independent wealth manager, to serve their client, right? Basically, our solution, we have this thing we call hybrid wealth manager, where the advisor will have a tablet or a dashboard, and also the client will have a dashboard, right? So from there, the advisor and the client will be able to see their portfolio. The advisor will be able to send like a proposal, all fully digital, to the client, and then the client from there can review and then choose to reject or accept the proposal, right? And also we have built-in tools for communication. So instead of using WhatsApp where it can be tracked, we have a built-in tools where the advisor and the client will be able to communicate with each other. It can be through video call, chat, even co-browsing, and all these can be tracked like in the system, right? So it can be used for regulatory purposes as well.
Okay. Additional comment from Peter, maybe?
Pasti lagi ada banyak pertanyaan dari teman-teman. Kalau betul ada beberapa informasi yang dicari atau beberapa pertanyaan setelah presentasi ini, mohon kontak Victor. Ini alamatnya email Victor atau saya sendiri, dan kita bisa mengadakan satu sesi untuk menjelaskan dan kasih demonstrasi. Karena waktu agak terbatas, saya takut sekarang nggak ada waktu untuk demo. Tapi untuk teman-teman yang lagi mau tahu lebih, jangan ragu-ragu, kontak kita berusaha untuk menjawab apapun pertanyaannya.
Of course, sure, yeah. Okay, Peter. I think we will have one other final questions. Yeah, from Pak Teguh Priambodo. Do you agree that there will be only 3 digital bank will survive in Indonesia? From BCA CEO statement is related to my question before.
Indonesia is a big country. Huh?
Yes.
I think there's some truth in that statement, because the winner takes all is what we have learned in the digital industry. We see the GAFAs, they have expanded very, very quickly. They had a very innovative culture. They're expanding in all kinds of directions. And if we see what these companies are doing, then there is a significant risk if Facebook tried to launch a digital currency, it stopped because the central banks wouldn't accept it. But it shows worldwide, not just in Indonesia, that there is something like winner takes it all. So in Indonesia, any Indonesian bank that wants to become leading and dominant, perhaps, I would not underestimate the impact of the Gojeks, the Bank Jagos, and the Grabs, and the C Bank and the Shopees. So I think it's going to be maybe a strong competition. And yes, there will be 3 or 4 major digital banks or digital financial service app. Maybe we call them digital super apps in a couple of years. And I hope the banks will be among them. But it's going to be a lot of competition. We see that happening. And I'm not talking months in months. I'm talking compared to 5 years ago. And if we see the valuation, you remember my first slide by Johan, the valuation of these fintechs compared to the valuation of the traditional banks has changed dramatically over the last years. And that valuation brings with us an investment capability to invest, a capability to procure, a capability to acquire. So a lot of competition is in the financial services industry, and the regulator will need to modify, adapt the regulations there as well.
Okay. Okay, Peter and Victor, there are one from CFA Society Indonesia, one request from CFA Society Indonesia. If you want to showcase your system, please do so. We have another 10 minutes until 15 minutes ahead to do it before we close.
Okay.
This.
Yes. Mungkin we spoke something about robo-advisors and we talked about mass affluent. Mungkin Victor bisa menjelaskan sedikit, kasih demo.
Ya.
Masih ada waktu, Pak?
Yes, maybe we have 10 minutes. 10 minutes, yeah.
Okay,
10 minutes.
Dengan senang hati.
Sure. Peter, can you stop sharing first? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
Okay, sure. I will share with you 1 second.
These are very good questions by Johan. I must say, they're not easy to answer.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'll show you is a robo-advisor. It's basically an goal-based investment tools, right? So this is especially useful in Indonesia, where you have a high tech-savvy population and also increasing the mass affluent segment, right? So basically, you have an app here, right? So you can see a total wealth on top. Then below, you can see your performance, the balance, right? This balance is inclusive of your investment and your cash with the bank, right? So you can see your deposit here as well, right? For example, it's a bank. Here you can see the asset classes, so you can determine whether you are well diversified, region and currency, okay? So from here, how do you create an investment or a new goal? It's very simple. It's just a few clicks. For example, I click on create new goal. Then it will ask me what will I like to save for, right? So all these are some example. So let's say if I want to save for a house in Bali as well, right? So I can move to Bali. So I can probably put here Bali mortgage, or you can change other names. You put how much you wish to achieve. So maybe the house in Bali costs about 150,000 US. You put 150, how many years, and your initial investment. Okay. So once that's done, you simply click on continue. All right. Then here it will give you the asset allocation. In this case, we assume that the client has already gone through the risk assessment right? When you open an account with the bank, and he or she was placed on the balance risk profile. Okay. So of course, if the client would like to change the strategy, right? So let's say you want to something more aggressive, you can do so. Then you can see the asset allocation will change, but then it will tell you that it is not recommended. Okay. So let's say if I'm happy with this, I can click on continue. Okay. Then it says again that initial investment of 10,000, I need about $605 per month for 12 years in order to reach 150,000, right? Then you have the forecast here, but of course, all this number can be changed. For example, if you don't like the number 605, you just want to round it up to 700 instead, you can do so. Once you change it to 700, you can see that the forecast, it will change from 150 to 170, right? And you can play around with the other numbers as well, right? Once that's done, you click on continue, and then it will bring you to the payment page where you decide which account from the bank you want to debit your 10,000 from. Let's say from the current account, I click current, and then the monthly contribution, I want to debit from the saving, let's say, right? And your date of first monthly payment. So when do you want to start? You can choose, and thereafter you can simply click on confirm and proceed, right? So you can see your investment is done. So basically it's very simple, 3 to 5 clicks, and then you are invested, right? Thereafter, you'll be able to see your investment under the investment tab. Hold on, let it load for a while. Okay, I'll get back to that. But I mean, what else can you do in the app itself? Basically, you have messages. You can link this to your RM. If not, if you want it to be fully self-serve, then you can change this to a chatbot. You have transactions, all your history can be saved here. Yeah, sorry, the internet's kind of slow. Then you have more where you can see your own profile. Then here you have the risk profile, right? Like I said, if you're a new client, usually you will need to go through an assessment. I'll show you a quick example, right? So basically the assessment, it will ask you some various questions like how much can you save in a year? Then you can choose, I can save maybe more than 20%. How much reserve do you have? I have more than 3 months, let's say, right? My income is stable. What do you expect for gain and losses? You choose again. What will you do if you have 15% profit? It's either you do nothing or you invest more, right? So you just click through these questions, and then the system will place you into a risk profile, right? Since I click mostly on the most aggressive options, then it determined that my risk profile is aggressive. Then from here, if I create a new goal, it will then propose the most aggressive asset allocation to me. Okay, sorry, it's not loading. Let me refresh it quickly. Oh, it's there.
It's quite advanced, huh?
Yes. So it's all fully no touch from the RM, right? So you can sell it basically to a huge population of Indonesia, right? So under investment, so this is the Bali mortgage that I did earlier, right? It is still pending, but of course you can have multiple goals. So basically you can save for retirement, for your kids' education, for villa in Bali, maybe for Peter, right? So you can have multiple goals, right? So on any of the goals, you can always go in and see how much you have saved. In this case, 6,000, goal is 150, another 10 years to complete. Asset allocation, here you have all the past performance of this goal. Future, you can see the forecast. Then you have options to withdraw some funds, to top up, to change the strategy if you wish to do so as well, right? At any point in time, right? So it gives a lot of control to the user.
It gives control to the user, but obviously also from a financial point of view. So far, there has not been any associated cost from the wealth management, right? Because you don't need to contact a wealth manager, he doesn't need to contact you. This is all self-service. So when we spoke earlier about decreasing marginal costs, if you really want to go into that mass market of Indonesia, you need these type of solutions on the mobile phone with obviously that sophistication and the APIs there.
Okay, that's all, Peter and Victor.
Yes.
I think for those interested, we normally do these deep dive sessions for 90 minutes. So this was an appetizer, but for those in the audience who would like to know more, please by all means contact us. You will get the presentation. I think it would be easy to obtain it. Any questions, contact myself or Victor, and mudah-mudahan kita punya sempat untuk berbicara di masa depan.
We can arrange another session for this, Pak Peter,
Yes.
Gampang, Pak.
Okay.
Easy. 90 minutes
Easy.
boleh.
90 minutes. Okay, thank you. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost get to the end of the session. Before I close this webinar, I would like to invite once again Victor and Peter to convey your closing remarks. Please, Victor and Peter.
Victor, you want to start?
So for the outro, I just want to thank everyone for attending, and also just to mention that Indonesia is a growing market. I mean, the trend is here to stay with the digitalization. So I mean, the incumbent will need to seize on the opportunity or be left behind.
And Indonesia for Additiv is a key market. We had our first successes here in Indonesia with customers. We're growing in Indonesia. So anyone who is looking for more information, please contact us. Any chance we can support you to accelerate your journey, because there's a lot happening and we have a lot of experience to help, whether you're from a traditional bank or whether you're from a fund manager, an asset manager, insurance company. We look forward to engage with you. And I want to thank Ibu Dewi for the support, and obviously Pak Rahman for having us here tonight as well. And thank you, Pak Johan, for your moderation.
Okay, thank you, Victor and Peter, for your closing remarks. Before I close the webinar, I would like to share some information with you all guys. For any of you with a CFA charter holder credential, you can claim one professional learning credit for your own. And the last one, wait. And for the last one, we will have another session with the CFA Society Indonesia and Moody's Investor Service on 23 until 25 November 2021. So please note and register for the event. Yeah. For your information, this webinar will be available in the YouTube channel. So for everyone that want to hear again, or for anybody that not have time to attend this webinar, please do watch the recording. Ladies and gentlemen, because of time, we are united in this event, and because of time, we also have to dismiss. I'm so happy we can finish this webinar without any significant technical difficulties. Thank you very much for your time and engagement on this occasion. It's a wonderful occasion indeed, and I hope I can see you all in the next event with the CFA Society Indonesia with other interesting topic. Stay safe, stay wealthy, and stay healthy. Good evening all, and see you again. Thanks, Peter, Victor, Pak Rahmat, and Bu Dewi.
Thank you, Pak Johan.